have you in my garden this morning, and nice to talk to everybody that's a friend of the Arboretum and an ex-graduate, and just people that love to come and walk in there. This is for everybody. There was somebody ahead of me. This was not my brainchild. I can't take credit for it. There was a lady called Val Libby who was a full-time professor, and they worked on it for years, and they came up with a packet this thick. And the problem was, every time they sent it downtown, it was too much for them. This is a specialized field, and if you don't know exactly what people are talking about, you kind of read it with, I don't know about this. And so a couple of us started to talk about we really should do this. And at the time, we were in between chairs, and Balda Lambda took over. And I went in and I said to him, "Now's a good time to submit the thing for the Arboretum." And he said, "Again?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he did part. He did like the introduction, and I did some of the middle, and there was a gentleman that worked in the greenhouse called Rudy Keller, who talked about what the maintenance would be for the grounds and things like that. So we divided it up, and don't you know, by doing that, they accepted it, right? It didn't take long at all. Once we had it down to readable size, it did not take long at all. And they came to me and they said, "Congratulations, you now have an Arboretum." And here I am. I was like, "Yeah, now what do I do?" You know, shake my hand. Put my hand out. I thought maybe they were giving me a check or something. Nope. They just shook my hand and said, "Now you have an Arboretum, and you're going to deal with so-and-so, and you have..." And then it dawned on me that part of my... They told me I could be the director of the Arboretum, which I hadn't planned on, because the kids were still little. And so, okay, and I knew that I could get plants for us. I never doubted that, because I knew everybody, and I could, all the times I helped them, I was figuring this was arm twisting time back to get plants donated. And that's what we did. The help, God bless the students. I really mean that, because some of them came in and did all the office work, sent out letters. Once I wrote them, they were the office work, and we started to think, well, what are we going to do? Where do we start? And so we got started, and I have to commend Phil Albright for stepping in. Can never leave him out. And the first sign that went up, he paid for half, and I paid for half. We now had at least a sign. An Arboretum sign, yay! And we were just real excited about that. And then we started. I don't think there was any faculty that didn't do something for it. So the faculty was to be commended. The students were to be commended. I mean, plants would come in, and it was for like a garden we were doing. They planted them. Even before the Arboretum, the first thing that was done when John Collins got there was the herb garden. And I'm proud to say that I sort of spearheaded that, and I have a plaque in there, which I'm really proud of. We had all kinds of people stepped up to the plate and helped. People that we never expected, people that when I asked them for money the first time, I had no track record. I had never been the head of an Arboretum. I'm being truthful. I mean, I had spoken many times at all kinds of arboretums, but I never ran that kind of thing. And so I went to people and I asked for money, and they all said, let us think about it. And then as we started to do things, a lot of those people stepped up to the plate and sent in donations, which I thought was pretty nice. What was neat is I told the students that if they would like to give a donation, that they could be part in that way. And I would have students come up to me and say, "Listen, I work and I go to school and I really don't have a lot of money." And they'd say, and they'd put a $15 check in my hand and say, but I want to do this. And I say, every little bit helps. Because that was important to them. And if I felt it was important to them, then it was important to me. So everybody had their finger in the pie, and for a good cause.
That's great.
And I'm really proud of the people that stepped up to the plate. And every person that's come through there, whether they're the person that's in charge of the greenhouse or the person that's teaching herbaceous or woody, puts their own stamp and their own mark. They change some of the things. And garden people, it's not a historic garden because we don't have a lot of the plants, plus a lot of the gardens are new. So every garden there is going to evolve and it's going to look different. So if you see it one way and come back 10 years later, it might not look the same. It might be in the same spot, but it won't look the same, and that's for a reason. All gardens evolve. Things die, new things are planted, and that's the way it is. And it just should be. My proudest accomplishment is going to sound funny because it's not my accomplishment. My proudest accomplishment is the people that come to national conventions and they visit, and I always would tell them it's really small and the budget is limited. And they would come back and they say, that is a good garden. For its size, that is really a good garden. You cannot ask for more than that. So our stuff is done with blood, sweat, and tears, and people with heart that are nice enough to donate and give and help us. And when you think about that, that's very different than a lot of places. I hope that they continue to fund it. I hope that people continue to be interested. I hope that people donate to it and make it bigger and better. It's a good school. The Arboretum is growing, and we can continue to grow it by supporting it.
So I came to Temple Ambler first as a student, and I was a mature student at the time. And I'd been a couple of times over the years, but that was my first really getting to know the campus and the Arboretum. And I just fell in love with it, and I fell in love with doing the courses, and I already had various degrees, so I actually wasn't going back to get a degree. I was really going back to get the knowledge and work out basically how I was going to garden here at Northview. And I really wanted to know about the native plants, and I knew that there was a focus on native plants from John Collins and various other people. And I had been brought up in England by a family of botanists. My dad's a botanist, so I knew a lot of the other things in Latin, but I didn't know the Latin names of a lot of the trees and things. So I really have to learn the Latin of the American plants. And after I graduated, I then stayed on the board of the Arboretum, and then I got the job as a director of the Arboretum. I think maybe I was already teaching. I was an adjunct professor for a while. I can't remember the order now, but I loved that as well. And I was there altogether probably 15 years or something like that. My involvement with the Arboretum. So it was a long time, and I love the Arboretum. So I love many of the things that I did there. I love the way that so many people are involved in the Arboretum, and it means so much to so many people and has done for well over a century. Probably my proudest time was the 100th anniversary, and a group of us got together to celebrate the 100th because we felt like it was important to call out the history of the women in particular, the first 50 years of the Arboretum's history. It's just such a groundbreaking, pun intended, site, and there isn't another one in the country. So we are very lucky in the Philadelphia area to have this wonderful collaborative group, and I think it was called the Gardens Collaborative maybe at one point when I was at Temple, but we now call it America's Garden Capital, and we're very lucky to have America's Garden Capital because it means that people that come to visit gardens can visit so many of these gardens, and each one of them, if you start looking down the list, has its own unique niche that it has within the gardening world. And Temple Ambler and its Arboretum really fits into that, primarily I think through its focus on the women and the history of women in horticulture, which other sites do have that, and we can play on that, and that leads people to do combined tours of those ones, so it fits nicely into that group. It fits into another group through its use of native plants in particular. It fits into the historic group as well, because there are other historic ones. Another sort of niche that it fits into is all of the sustainability, as we know, and native plants and use of native plants. I love the emphasis on the healing aspect of gardens. I mean, particularly during the pandemic. I mean, I think not only the visiting gardens is therapeutic, but actually the process of learning how to garden and doing the garden, which was what the women started. It was the brain and the hands that were involved in the garden. It has a more garden-esque vibe when you walk through the Ambler Arboretum, because each garden room has its own unique history, design, palette of horticulture that is very rich because it's a teaching garden. There are so many genera, so many taxa represented, whereas some of the other gardens are more for show, so they'll have a whole swath of one particular plant, but you can really learn your plants whether you're just the visiting public or whether you're taking a class. So I think that's another unique thing, the fact it's a teaching garden and has been used as a teaching garden for 110 years. Actually, having spent so many years on campus, my favorite spots were probably related to the seasons, because I would know where to go at a particular time of year that a certain flower or tree was in bloom. And for example, the woods, through the woods in early spring has to be one of the most gorgeous places around. And you walk through there and there's a carpet of blue of all the scilla and the China doxa and everything. And then it had a white phase before that and a yellow phase. And the Louise Bush Brown formal gardens, oh my goodness, in the height of summer, that has to be the best place. You know, and you just walk around the Arboretum at different times, and of course I love the herb garden, I love the wetland garden, and the, oh my goodness, Ernesta Ballard, you know, conifers, the Colabera conifers. So no, I like each one for their own reason. So that's not a very good answer, I know. I think of so many times when we, as particularly parties, because that first what was called the Rhapsody in Bloom, we were obviously trying to raise money for the Arboretum and bring in more supporters that weren't necessarily alumni. So we always loved a good party, and a good party, oh my goodness, in those gardens, they're just tailor-made for a party. I love some of the memories of tours, particularly with the older alumni, and they were the inspiration for that whole 100th celebration, because you would have, we always had a celebration in the summer for the alums, and they would come back and they would tell you about their times on campus, and they would go to the portion of the bed that they had looked after. It was their portion, and if they'd forgotten to maintain it, they would come out with a flashlight and do it, after curfew or whatever. And they would tell the stories of all the animals that they looked after, and the hijinks that they would get up to, which always would crack me up. So I love all those times listening to the alumni and taking them around and showing them the new gardens that we were putting in. Because while we were there, we called it the ABCs of gardens. So we put in the Albright winter garden, the ballad healing garden and the Colibero conifer garden. So that was fun, and they loved to see how the students were still using it. I love teaching. I have very fond memories of tromping around the Arboretum on snowy days with, my posse of students of all ages, and, everything coming behind me, and the little frozen hands. And that campus has been used over and over again, by the students, by outside people, by everyone, and loved by so many people. I think that's the thing. It's such a community resource as well as a university resource, and it really is. It's a very special place, very special.